Welcome to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be. Join us on a journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and inspiration as we explore the world of leadership and personal growth. In each episode, we will explore the art and science of effective leadership, bringing you insights, stories, and strategies from experts and thought leaders across various industries. And now your host, Dawn Marie Bornhammer, Maisha B. Hoy, and Dr. Sharon H. Porter. Welcome to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be as you lead, empower, inspire, and achieve. I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter, Editor-in-Chief of Vision and Purpose Lifestyle Magazine.
And I'm Dawn Marie Bornhammer, Founder and Chief Impact Officer for Mission Inspired Consulting.
And our guest today is a powerhouse in public education, Dr. Ronald G. Taylor. With over 28 years of service, Dr. Taylor has worn many hats: classroom teacher, principal, superintendent, and professor. He's led school districts, both urban and suburban, and most recently served as the chief school administrator for South Orange, Maplewood, and the Willingboro Public Schools in New Jersey. Dr. Taylor is widely recognized for his work in educational equity and instructional excellence. His intentional integration initiative has been heralded as a pioneering solution to a long-standing racial and socioeconomic disparities in education, even garnering attention from the New Jersey State Legislature. He's also masterfully led over $200 million in school construction projects, proving that he not only builds programs, but he builds legacies. He's also the author of the recently released The Courage to Lead with Integrity for Equity. Welcome to the show, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you so much for that kind and generous introduction. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
Absolutely. We really are excited and we can't wait to dive in. And I just want to start by asking what prompted you to write your most recent book.
Fantastic question. So, just being honest, writing is kind of my love language, right? When I was a superintendent, principal, assistant principal, and even a teacher, writing was just the way that I was able to lock in information. When I would sit during board meetings or during, meetings with my team members or one-on-one parent engagement or PTA meetings, I would always find that writing not only locked in the information that was being shared with me, but it also gave the folks who I was meeting with the feeling that I was actively listening to what they were sharing. What they were sharing with me was so important. I was making sure that I locked it in to be reviewed later. And so it just kind of became my way of communicating. And so I had so many notebooks from just the years and years of work that I did in public education. It just felt like a natural way for me to share the lessons that I learned and my experiences, hoping to help others.
And in the book, you talk a lot about integrity as a foundation for equity-driven leadership. Why is integrity so essential, and how can leaders strengthen this in themselves?
So I guess I just remember being a leader during tough times and in challenging places. I write about the fact that just about everywhere that I worked, it was considered to be a challenging assignment. Even when I had the opportunity to be in places that were not as challenging, I was attracted and drawn to really making a difference in places that had not had success before. And I found that as a leader, courage was just so underrated, right? Just being able to understand, if you're not in that leading position, walking into spaces where people might not be happy with what's happening, or they might be angry about what occurred or disagree with what's happening, and being able to walk into those spaces and having the courage to do what's right, right? To be able to always understand that doing the right thing is what we stand for, right? That integrity, doing what you think is right, cannot be compromised, even if the space becomes intimidating. Even as a leader, we're all human. We all experience fear. We all experience unhappiness. We experience, the feelings that are shared by people who may have something that they're not happy about and they want to tell you about it. But all those things shouldn't shake leaders from doing what they know is the right thing to do. And to me, that always was a root for me as a leader, even in tough situations, being able to stick to what you know is the right thing. And that speaks to the integrity. And for me in particular, understanding that equity was a thread that kind of followed me my entire life. And so wanting to document that in education, from being, a very young child in Detroit to being a leader of a district with thousands of kids and hundreds of employees, that need for equity and leaning on your integrity and having the courage to do so was just a non-negotiable for me.
I absolutely love it. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Taylor, one of the things I loved about your book, and I admittedly still have to finish it, but is the integrity component, right? And that's one of my own core values. I was trained by Dr. Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, and we had to identify those core values. So, along with integrity, what is another core value that you hold that really you walk and live with every day, that you embody, both as an educator and just as a human being?
Oh my goodness, so many fantastic questions. One of the things that I wrote about was the power of representation. I think that even in our daily lives, representation and what we see and how what we see influences what we view as possible is just so important. I tell a story in the book about my life as a student, right? And all the principles that were my principles as an elementary student, middle school student, high school student, and how I had general thoughts about principalships. The principals were all, in their 50s, 60s, or 70s or older. They were all very, strong folks. I never had anything really negative to say about my principals. And I knew I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to be a principal, but I never thought that being a principal could happen before I was in my 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so it really wasn't something that I was striving for as a really young neophyte educator. But then I went through a new teacher orientation in Prince George's County, Maryland. And this gentleman walked by me during one of our breaks, and he had on a name tag that said, principal, but he looked like me. He looked my age. And I was just so shocked by that. I had never seen that. And I stopped him and he gave me a few minutes and I asked him about who he was and how he became a principal so young and why he did it and all those things. And just that engagement, the representation of seeing someone who looked like me, who looked my age, changed my entire trajectory professionally. And so I really believe that representation is so important and so impactful, and it's really underrated when we look at how kids grow up and the decisions that they make. And some of them don't even know certain opportunities or professions even exist because they don't see the representation of that in their day-to-day lives.
No, I love that. And I know a few male educators who have really stepped up in a big way to even just show young men what it looks like to lead and to be responsible and to show up for themselves, much less for their opportunities, and really just introducing them over time. So I love that you take that responsibility very seriously in terms of representation, and that someone mirrored that for you, which gave you the invitation to probably try something that you might have otherwise thought was not available to you at that time.
Oh, fantastic way of saying that. 100%. It wasn't as though the gentleman came up to me and said, "Hey, look at me. I am here to represent to you what you can be. It's just organic, right? What you see. And I remember being a younger teacher, and we started an affinity group for students called the U Club, right? And the U Club stood for Unity and Unidad, et cetera. And just those students being able to see us who may not have been in our classes, but being able to see young Black male teachers. And I talk about that in our book a little bit too. And just knowing that as a leader, as someone who is representing an underrepresented group, you'll never really know the lives that you touch and just how much of a blessing and opportunity that is.
Absolutely. And then, leadership is a choice, and we have a responsibility once we make that choice. So I love that you are seeing all of those breadcrumbs and have found your way to all of these great stories to share with everyone. I can't wait to finish.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Taylor, your journey in education really spans nearly 3 decades. Like when you look back and you talked about that pivotal moment right here in Prince George's County when you saw the young principal that gave you the mindset that you could do this as well. Are there any other moments or turning points that really shaped your leadership philosophy the most?
Oh my God, certainly. I think that when I made the decision after that engagement that we spoke about to seek out the opportunity to be a leader, and being in the DMV area, and for those who may not be as familiar, that Maryland, DC, and Virginia indeed do touch. And if you're living in the DMV area, you could easily be in Virginia, Maryland, or DC within just a few minutes. And so I remember being a young man with a family, and I left one school district and went to another, and just being just really flabbergasted by the differences in the facilities. Being in a small neighborhood school in Temple Hills, Maryland, versus being in a school in Alexandria, Virginia, that had a built-in after-school center space, and that the master schedule had a lot of time for the teachers to have grade level planning and computers in the classroom. This is back in in the late 90s, and just the difference in that facility, and wanting to know, did that facility difference really have a significant impact on student achievement and the performance of students? And so that really drove both my thesis and my dissertation research around the topic of facilities and how important are facilities, both the condition and the student impact that could be correlated to that condition. And as you said earlier, I was just so fortunate to be able to go to districts after I completed that research and become a leader of school construction in multiple school districts, working with a fantastic team and partners, and being able to emphasize during those construction planning meetings how important student outcomes were in those decisions, and making sure that the decisions that we were making, even if they were small decisions, were leading to supporting students who would be in those spaces. And so that was definitely one, just being able to be in different schools early in my career and using that intellectual curiosity to kind of spurn the research that I did as a master's and doctoral student.
I really love that. And sadly, we're actually going through that right now. School construction to schools that haven't been touched in 50 years. And I've not seen the research, but I can tell you it absolutely matters. Absolutely, without a doubt. And just as you mentioned, going from district to district, but a district as large as where I am, going from north to south, even, there may sometimes be a different. So I appreciate that research, and I do look forward to looking to see exactly what the data says. But that is a lived experience for me, that I can attest to. So thank you for that.
Oh, sure. And there's a chapter in my book where I pull some quotes from my dissertation, just really showing that and then connecting it to my real life lived experience of how important it is. And I'll give you a few examples of these kind of decisions when you're in a space where you're making plans for a school construction and understanding how important it is that it may sound silly to some folks who are not in education. When a teacher leaves their classroom and comes in the next day, that space really shouldn't be disturbed, right? I have experiences dealing with construction where sometimes not all of the folks who were construction people understood the life of school people, right? And you don't come in there messing around with the teachers' things and moving books. And,
Yes.
I had one example where, for those folks who are teachers or educators out there, just prepare because this story is crazy, where a teacher came in and there was a big boot print on her desk. So you can imagine, right, that person, she was not happy. She was happy construction was happening, but she wasn't happy with that. And so just trying to be the protector of the schoolhouse while also being a part of the planning of what's going to happen to improve the schoolhouse is just, it's a delicate balance for leaders.
It is. Thank you for that.
So earlier in my career, I taught in Baltimore City Public Schools. And so I also resonate very deeply with what you're sharing in terms of just the facilities. And we had a beautiful school community in the early 2000s that took a lot of pride in helping with painting or renovations and fundraising for a basketball court, things like that, which, was a beautiful gift to the students, yet we didn't have air conditioning. Right. And so you really think about their ability to just come and focus and really stay attentive, and what that says about how we feel about giving them that, right, that space to learn. And so I really appreciate that research. I can't wait to check that piece out. My next question is really built on maybe some of the lessons that you learned from the different school districts and systems that you observed. So having been in the DMV area myself, I'm familiar with that analogy between Alexandria, Virginia, and Temple Hills. I'm curious, though, like state to state, or even with your different roles and capacities over time, what did you see in terms of urban versus suburban school systems, and where are the opportunities for leadership to continue to do the work?
Oh my gosh, fantastic question. So I will tell you that here in New Jersey, and maybe also in many other states, there are some districts that have state control as a part of their methodology, right? They are state controlled districts for any number of reasons. And also there are districts that are local control. For those who don't know, besides New Jersey being recognized as the #1 state in the United States for public school outcomes, it's also special from my perspective as someone who's been in other places. It's local rule for the most part. There's over 600 districts in the state of New Jersey. And while, states like, Maryland and Florida and others that are they have really big school districts with 300,000 and 400,000 kids. Many of the districts here in New Jersey are local rule and just for the city or town that they're in. So some of the districts are as small as a 1 school district, and versus maybe Newark, New Jersey, where I worked before, with about 40,000 students, which is the biggest district here in New Jersey, and some that again have state rule where the superintendent and the board of education are appointed by the governor, versus local rule where the local election determines who the board members are on the Board of Education, and the Board of Education then hires the superintendent. And so some of those differences in governance are very, very significant. There are some local rules where the law is that the mayor appoints the Board of Education, and again, the Board of Education hires the superintendent. And so some of that really does make a difference in how the higher level administrators have to govern, right? Because when you're the superintendent and you have a Board of Education, depending on the size of the board, you might have 5 bosses, you might have 7 bosses, you might have 9 bosses that are a part of, you know, who you report to and who you give reports to, and who who you're working with to build the budgets and all those type of things. And I can tell you one significant change that I saw in my time as a superintendent earlier. This is probably 2011, earlier, in that time frame, the township where your district was located, they also have like a township council, like a city council and a mayor. And so if the local community voted down your budget, then the local township would vote on how your budget would come out, right? So let's say, for example, in some places it was just tradition that the community voted down the budget, and because they didn't want their taxes to go up, or the majority did not. And so the local township would then discuss it, and you would meet with them, and then they would vote on whether to keep your budget the way that you presented it, or to cut it by $1 million or $2 million or $3 million or $5 million, whatever the agreed upon number is within that township. And so it was my first time doing that when I left Newark as an assistant superintendent, and I went to Willingboro, and I was learning about this because Newark was totally different because it was a state-run district. And when I was talking with my team and learning about it and meeting everyone said, well, budget time's coming, so get ready. And, this was all new to me. I had run budgets as a principal, but as a superintendent, it's different. And so I learned about that there had just been a propensity in that community for the budget to be voted down by the township folks who were there, by the neighbors that you see, right? And so we went on a big tour. We traveled all around to all the school communities. I did presentations with the school business administrator. And at the end of all that effort, I think our budget was voted down by like 200 votes, right? And I was crushed. Because we had done so much, and we were telling the story, had never been told. But then we went to the township and we did a presentation for them, and they had never had that before. They had never had anybody come and explain to them why the budget was important and the great decisions that were in there and how we were supporting kids. And they voted to keep it as it was. And so that was a huge victory for us. And then soon thereafter, the laws changed. And so after that time, if you kept your budget within 2% of the previous year, you didn't have to go to a vote, right? So just showing how those rules of engagement change, and you have to be prepared as a leader to do your best, to do the best for your kids and your staff and your teachers.
Yeah, and I think that's also a really good example of that curiosity you talked about earlier, right? You recognize that maybe there was a chance that if you informed people and allowed them to make a more informed decision, they may to make a different decision. So many people often take history as an example of what is possible and may have not taken the time, but you took the time and it mattered. And that's a great demonstration of leadership, but also a great lesson for those that were watching and following, and for your team to see that you were willing to put in the time and the work and that it paid off.
Yeah, I think that also in some spaces, the school business administrator is the lone soldier presenting the budget. And so I wanted to make sure that when we're doing presentations about significant amounts of money, we're talking about why pedagogically it supports our students, why in the data it shows that this is a great way for us to spend our money, and that your children's outcomes are likely to be positively impacted by it, right? So it was to me just about steering the conversation back to the reason that we're here. We're here to be an academic driven group of folks who are supporting our kids. Yes, we have to keep the lights on and we have to do construction and we have to buy new furniture and we have to pay everyone's salary. But the reason that we're here is to help our kids and to help them improve the trajectory of their life journey.
Absolutely. And when we keep that at the forefront, hopefully we can make some really good decisions still.
Yes.
So, Dr. Taylor, I know that we know that equity work, especially in this current era, often challenges the status quo. And school leaders in certain demographics, they may fear pushback from their staff or families or board members or the community, especially when discussing things such as race, privilege, or systemic disparities. Does your book address any of this in light of everything that's happening currently?
Yes. So in the introduction that you so brilliantly shared with everyone, it spoke about my work around school equity and my development with the fantastic team of the Triple I, and the reason for it. And when I went from Willingboro Public Schools to South Orange and Maplewood School District, one of the reasons that I went on that journey was that there was a crossroads happening in that school district where there was a very drastic difference in the enrollment of the schools depending on where they were in the community. And there was also a recently released statement from the state saying that New Jersey, was dealing with litigation where it was being stated that we were the sixth most segregated school system in the country as a state. And that was shocking to everyone. But because, again, back to the local rule where each district is based on the township or city that they're in. And so there was litigation that was pending, big litigation about the lack of integration. And so it was just weird in 2019 to begin reading about litigation around segregation, something that sounds like the 1960s or 1950s or 1930s in the Jim Crow South. And so I am by nature kind of a problem solver, and I had a lot of success building great teams and having great outcomes as a principal and also as a superintendent. And it just really spoke to me trying to solve that problem and also do it in a way that engaged the community, because the community was known to be liberal and also a place where it was really, for some people, really expensive to live, but also probably one of the most diverse communities in the state. So all those things drew me as a new challenge. And so when talking with the board and interviewing for the job and all those things, we talked about the ideas around how you could integrate elementary schools where one school was 70% free and reduced lunch and another one is 7% free and reduced lunch. One is 85% white and one is 70% black. And how do you do that, right? And so one of the things that I believe in is that there's a time for us to develop shared answers. I'm the boss, quote unquote boss. I can give an answer. I have that opportunity to do that. But the best way for me was to try and develop a community answer. And so we held a huge, probably over 1,000 people, a kind of a huge town hall to talk about this. And a lot of people, when they saw the flyers, they came to this town hall and they thought I was going to announce the way that we were going to integrate our schools, but that wasn't it at all. We were going to talk about integrating our schools. We invited professors, we invited legal experts to talk about the history of segregation and talk about the impact legally and the impact on our kids. And we really shared information with all these folks who came out. And then once again, this is probably one of my signatures. We took the show on the road and we went school to school to school and held individual town halls at each of the school communities where I was able to listen to the concerns and we noted the concerns and we presented different ideas and ways that this had been done before. And then COVID hit. When COVID-19 hit in March of 2020, we were at the end of that. And so we began to do, digital town halls and began to do, folks thought that that was going to stop us from doing this work. Some folks did, but we continued. And I was able to take all of the different feedback that we got from parents and we did a huge presentation, a digital presentation. And at the end of it, over 5,000 folks had watched it, but we only had 16 questions, right? And so we took those 16 questions and boiled down just responses, and we gave the board the idea that we had developed for a pilot, which was the Intentional Integration Initiative, the III. And we started with a small group of kindergartners and applied that algorithm through their student placement. And the first year went really well. We understood that the parents' number one concern, I mean the number one concern, was moving kids out of schools they were already in, right? Taking my baby who loves school A and taking them out and putting them somewhere else, and how traumatic that would be. We understood that and we did not do it. We understood that concern number two were parents who had kids in the same grade span going to different schools. Now you have two parent conferences, you have two drop-offs, two pickups, two lunch drop-offs, all those things. So we didn't do it, right? And once we dealt with those two main concerns, most of the families were totally fine, right? Because we had good schools and the kids were brand new to those schools and they were in the schools with their siblings. And so we were able to, that was year one. It was such a success that our board asked us for year two to include middle schools, because our middle schools had a significant difference in their populations. So we applied our algorithm to middle schools. And I believe after 5 years, we had, more than 3,000 kids who had gone through this algorithm who were being placed according to the III. And as you said, I was asked to come and present this to the state legislature as a possible solution to the big lawsuit around state segregation.
Mhm. And that's really a part of the courageous leadership, the courage to lead for equity that you speak about and write about. And I definitely applaud your efforts on this road to equity because truly the fight is real right now. And that's from across the country. In various areas. So I definitely want to thank you for the work that you are doing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's and again, I continue to just say that I had such a fantastic team, right? That being able to build teams and have teams believe in what we're doing and working together and being unified in that work is just an unbelievable experience as a leader. And I've been able to have that throughout my career with just outstanding educators who wanted to be a part of the work that we were doing. And with the III and the work that we did, we adopted some of the methodology from Berkeley, California. They had the Berkeley approach with micro neighborhoods, and I won't bore everybody with those details, but I have it in the book for those who are interested. And some of the things that we did include also getting parent feedback, right? Being able to do surveys for parents as we're going through this process, because some of the challenges are understandable, right? I met with all the realtors in the community, right? Because we've all, had an opportunity, I hope, to be able to buy a home. And when you're buying a home as a young family, one of the sell points is realtors tell you, well, if you buy this home, you're going to go to this school next door, right?
Right.
But it wasn't the case. And so I met with the realtors and I did presentations for them and told them, don't you tell parents that you know what school they're going to go to, because it's not accurate, right? And so all of those thoughtful pieces and trying to just be so communicative when it comes to equity, I think that the communication is just so key. Being able, some people are never going to be happy because they aren't getting exactly what they want. And so we understand that, but we also have to understand to have the courage, as you emphasize, the courage that sometimes as a district, as an entity, these are the belief systems that we have agreed on and we're going to stick to. And sometimes, unfortunately, the answer is no, right? You have to be able to say that. And I do executive coaching now and leadership development for folks. And we talk all the time about when you walk into a boardroom and there's 20 angry people, it can feel like it's the world, right? But it's not the world. And it's sometimes the answer is no. And you have to have the courage and conviction to stand on that no and be able to explain it as well.
Explain it, right. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So, Dr. Taylor, a lot of the guests that listen, a lot of our audience members are young or new to their leadership journey, right? They're stepping into it. They are passionate about something and they're really eager to make a difference. What would you say to those new aspiring leaders that are stepping into that leadership role, maybe for the first time, building their first team or leading a school for the first time or stepping up in a business? What's something that you learned that you would impart upon them as a leader?
Oh, what a great question. Part of what I'm doing now as an educational consultant, I'm doing a few aspiring administrator academies for a few districts that have asked for that support. And I use my book to drive as a part of the curriculum for those aspiring admin academies. And I think one of the most important things to realize as a school leader, even though it's uncomfortable sometimes to think about it, is that everyone is watching you, right? Like representation goes beyond, right? When you're the leader, people are not just watching you as in physically you, but how likely you are to be consistent in your beliefs. How honest are you, right? How calm are you when there's an emergent situation? How much compassion do you show? There's a piece in my book when I talk about that one of the most difficult things as a school leader is there's a time when we say, hey, we're committed to the whole child. We understand that kids bring baggage with them to schools that they don't have control over. That sometimes the neighborhoods come into the schools and all those kinds of things. But what happens when that happens? When you're the leader, are you quitting on those kids? Are you giving up on those kids? Are you honest with those families? When I was an assistant principal in Washington, D.C., a chapter in the book is about that journey, because I just can't believe that there was anybody in the United States who had as challenging an assistant principalship as I did, right? That's my own selfish view. But, I had a principal who had a heart attack. At this time, the the DC sniper situation happened.
Mm-hmm.
9/11 happened at the Pentagon. All these things were happening, and I was at a city school, and you know, I became an assistant principal pretty young. I was in my 20s still, and so all those things were going. And no matter how old you are as a leader, everyone's looking at you for the temperament that they should have about these situations. They're looking at you to, if you're making decisions based on what's comfortable for adults or what's best for children. And it's just it's such a humbling experience when you have folks tell you that as a leader, you're making a difference. And so I would say for any of those aspiring administrators who are just getting started and thinking about what they should be thinking about, be conscious of your consistency and be very clear in communicating your beliefs and your non-negotiables, and hold yourself to it. And everyone will, as a community, as a school community, will lean on those things you share.
And I think those lessons are applicable across different verticals of business, really. When you think about leadership, you think about setting an example, right? Holding those boundaries, your non-negotiables, and then walking it out, right? Really demonstrating the values and not just having them be a poster on the wall, and really make sure that people see you. And if you say that you do something, demonstrate that you do it, right? Take the time and make sure you're consistent with that. And that's how you earn trust, right? And that's how we earn the right to say the hard things, is when we take the time to earn the right first and build that trust. I was a young 20-something teacher in Baltimore City public schools, and I remember one of my first parents coming to parent-teacher conferences, and she's like, "You're pretty brave." And I said, why would you say that? And she said, "Well, first of all, you're working in our community. Second, the other reason you're pretty brave is that you made attendance required at parent-teacher conference." I said, yes. Your children are 8. I'm not sending home their report card. You're coming to talk to me. And if you can't talk to me, you got other options. But guess what? Me sitting on your front step is an option. Us doing a phone conference is an option. You walking through this classroom door is an option. But not showing up is not an option.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 98% attendance that year. And she came at the last conference and she's like, "I can't believe you got all these people to do that." And I said, "I'm not giving up on their kids. They can't either. We're doing this together." Right. And so I just held the line, and it's exactly what you said. Right. So they were waiting for me to waver, and I didn't. And and then they wanted their next children. They wanted their cousins, all the families. I taught for 5 years. I had families, all the siblings. I had the cousins. I had people sending recommendations and requests to be in my class. Like, I just had to earn the right to be there with them and for them to know I wasn't going anywhere. And that I cared. Right. And so a lot of what you're saying is exactly that, right? This opportunity to demonstrate that and to show up every day.
It is. And I remember as a teacher, I remember when I would meet the students on the first day of school, and I would shake their hands and shake their parents' hands, and I would just say, "Oh my God, you guys are so lucky. You're in the best class in the school." Right. And they would believe it. And it became the fact, right? Because that was our expectations of ourselves. No one else had to do anything. It was us, right? And the belief that I had in them and the belief that they had in themselves. And when I was a principal, the name of my school was Emory Elementary School. And we talked about the Emory way, right? It wasn't, you have to quote unquote be good. When the student was, out of sorts, we would talk about the Emory way, right? And that was the self-esteem that we had about ourselves and the belief that we had in ourselves. And I wrote a whole bunch about Emory in my book because it was just an amazing experience. And, part of it is having students have the affirmations. They're just so powerful. And then
Mhm.
our affirmations were so powerful that our teachers came to me and said, we wrote an affirmation that we'd like to do. We feel crazy listening to 500 kids give this affirmation, and we're just standing there. And they developed their own affirmation. Our students' affirmation was, my heritage is one of greatness, but I know that I can do more. I must never do less than those who came before. What my mind can conceive and my heart can believe, I can achieve. And the kids would just rock the walls with the affirmation. And then the teachers, when they created their own, the teacher's affirmation was simply, we shall teach each student as if they are our own. Right. And so when you start like that, you're going to have a great day. Right. And so that is the kind of, it's like, even if a student might be having a rough start from the community as they enter the school, I'm at the front door, my dean's at the front door, we greet, we do our affirmations, but all of that positive energy is going to go into those kids. And that's why we had such great results.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that with us.
What an impactful interview, Dr. Taylor. We just want to say thank you for being our guest and for sharing all your knowledge, your wisdom. And I'm sure for those individuals who will pick up your book, they will gain so much from it. Can you please take the time to share your social media contact, any ways that our audience can connect with you and how they can purchase your book?
Let me just say that this has been just super enjoyable for me. You all do a fantastic job, and I'm just so thankful for the invitation to join you. I'm very easy to find out. In my book, I write about why I put the G in my name. My name is Ronald G. Taylor, and the G is for Gerald. And so when you go on LinkedIn, if you put Ronald G or Dr. Ronald G. Taylor, you should find me. You can go to my website, teamtaylorleadership.com if you like, and you can learn more about me and also pick up my book. And my book's also available everywhere else that you can get books, Amazon and also on BookBaby and other places. And I'm just really, really thankful. When I talk about retiring from the superintendency, I was just having lunch with a couple of current superintendents today, and they're in their 5th and 6th and 7th year, and some of the research that Dr. Sean Joseph shares about the journey of the Black superintendent and the female superintendent, and how the average of these career spans is getting less than 2 years now, right? And these folks are in the middle of their career. And being a retiree from that life, I did that 13 years. I'm just so thankful to be able to share, and hoping that, you're magnifying yourself. I hope that the lessons that I'm sharing are going to positively impact other folks' journeys and the kids that they served. I always brag about that. There were some superintendents who came from my teams who are now superintendents, and there's just not a better compliment for me. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to following and watching more of your broadcasts.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we are so fortunate to have Dr. Joseph return to us as our interim superintendent. So grateful for that. And again, Dr. Taylor, thank you for your time, your insight, and the transformative work that you continue to do on behalf of students and families. Your commitment to equity and innovation is not only inspiring, but for me as an elementary principal, is essential for the future of education. So thank you. And to our audience, we thank you for joining us for another episode of Leading with Purpose podcast. As always, definitely return with us. I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter.
And I'm Dawn Marie Bornheimer. As you navigate your leadership journey, please remember that leading with purpose is not just a philosophy, but a commitment to making a positive impact.
Continue to lead, empower, inspire, and achieve. And if today's conversation sparked something in you, share this episode with your network, subscribe to this podcast, and follow us for more impactful stories and purposeful leadership.
Until next time, lead with passion,
Lead with a positive intention, and by all means, continue to lead with purpose. Thank you for joining the Leading with Purpose podcast. Please join us every Monday for a new episode.